Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our monthly webinar series. I'm Enoch Mufikwe, Learning and Development Practitioner for Geotab Africa. So on our topic for this month, we'll be talking about fuel management. And before we jump right into the session, just a quick reminder on a couple of things. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our social media platform, YouTube, and the link will be made then available on the various other social platforms. Should you have any questions, please put them in the chat box or the Q&A section at the bottom, and we will be addressing them towards the end of this session. And any additional questions that you may have post to the session, please send them to info@geotabafrica.com, and our dedicated support team will be addressing them as quickly as possible. All right, now with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So on the agenda for today, we will be looking deeper at what fuel management is all about and what it means for you as fleet managers or fleet-based organizations, why fleet managers should manage their fuel in the very first place, and how to use Geotab to manage your fuel. Just a couple of some tips as well that we'll be touching on. And lastly, we will be tackling a few questions that you might have, and a couple of them were already posted upon registration for today's webinar series. So, fuel management. Now, this is a holistic process that will require fleet-based organizations to have a proper plan in place. So it's not a simple thumbs up of what can be done to keep fleet's fuel-related costs at a low. The whole process involves maintenance, control, and monitoring consistently. Looking at the points highlighted, when touching on how fuel management helps to ensure the best utilization of resources, we're referring to things like using the right or the best type of vehicle for the job. For example, the delivery of medication or food. Now, looking at the average quantity per order, one can decide whether a passenger vehicle or a motorbike, of which the motorbike now being the one that is more affordable or the more affordable option for that industry or for that job. And when planning to manage fuel expenses, one has to understand various contributing factors, like fuel price trends, increases and decreases, and the contributing factors to those changes. And fuel management systems are then designed to monitor and to control fuel consumption within your fleet, all right? Now, a fleet or a fuel management system is a combination of hardware and software products. In this case, we're referring to things like your Geotab device that are installed in your vehicles, as well as the My Geotab software system. Now, that together enables fleet managers to have access to information that can assist in the controlling of fuel consumption within their fleets. And Geotab's fuel reports help to measure and track how or where fuel is actually consumed a lot. Now, we will have a look at some of these reports a little later on in the session. So the big question is then, why do we need to manage fuel as fleet-based organizations? So while there are many reasons, we have just highlighted a few over here, as you can see. One of the main reasons why fleet managers need to monitor fuel consumption in a fleet is purely because it accounts for the largest portion of the overall fleet running costs. And with the constant fuel price increases that we have seen in South Africa, that means that the running costs of fleets in South Africa, for example, will keep getting more and more expensive, right? And then how do we minimize costs or save money where possible? That's one of the things that can be done, or why we do fleet management in the very first place. So when it comes to saving money, that is the ultimate goal, of any managing fleet manager or managing fuel in the very first place. So with Geotab's EVSA and fuel-based reports, fleet managers can now assess the entire fleet to determine the best possible moves. It will improve fuel efficiency as you can track your vehicle maintenance as well as your driver routes. And when you're talking about driver routes, implementing efficient driving routes is necessary to stay a step ahead and can help to make cost-effective decisions so that misuse of fuel can be eliminated if not brought to a minimum. Now, to explain more on why it is important to monitor and manage fuel in your fleet, let's quickly have or quickly watch the following video.
Fuel, often one of the biggest expenses when it comes to fleet management. Fleet managers have no control over fuel price fluctuations, but proper management and tracking of fuel consumption can help you avoid overconsumption. Typical fleet costs include tires, maintenance, insurance, driver wages, and fuel, contributing to about 30% of fleet costs. With fuel taking up such a huge chunk of fleet expenses, the sensible thing to do would be to carefully control it. How? Through fuel usage data by Geotab. Traditionally, collecting fuel data involved manually monitoring total kilometers traveled and then comparing these to fuel receipts. Tedious, time consuming, never mind human error. Geotab makes it easier for you to measure your fuel usage with a plug and play solution. This solution helps you identify any overconsumption and make informed decisions. Measure, identify, and report on your fuel consumption with Geotab. Geotab Africa, management by measurement.
Right. Now, Geotab offers the most extensive reports and matrix to help you in decision making to reduce your fuel consumption. With the data provided by Geotab's reports, you could then improve your fleet's fuel economy and observe side-by-side fuel data that will allow you to monitor any driving behavior that is linked to increased fuel costs. Now, Geotab's fuel efficiency reports use fuel consumption data to make comparisons between, things like drivers or vehicles in order to target those improvement areas that also allow for us to introduce coaching to the drivers. Now we're going to have a look at how fleet managers can achieve this, starting with some general tips and then looking at some of Geotab's specific reports designed for fuel management. Just a few general tips to help in taking that first step of managing your fleet's fuel consumption or trying to at least keep it to a minimum. Number one, reducing of idling, monitor tire pressure, preventive maintenance, downsizing of vehicles, and then lastly, changing or improving driver behavior, which is also referred to aggressive driving. Now, idling is one of the most underrated ways of unnecessary fuel consumption, when the truth is that fleet idling can be costly to business operations. All right. So now we also see that we have true idling versus operational idling. What is the difference? True idling is, in simple language, normal idling, and in some cases can be seen as unnecessary or waste idling. Some drivers idle without even thinking about it. For example, an employee waits in the car for a co-worker at a local coffee shop. The engine is humming in the background. However, as mentioned, fleet idling can be very costly to business operations in terms of wasted fuel. Accumulation of vehicle maintenance is something that can also be considered when we are idling unnecessarily. And then on the other hand, to understand operational idling, think of a construction truck that needs to be offloaded, offloading of bricks. Now, the truck might not be moving, but the offloading process needs the vehicle to be on idle mode or in idle mode. Now, this type of idling is acceptable and in most cases unavoidable. Also, 3 to 5 minutes of vehicle warm-up time can also be considered to be operational idling as well. If you think about, for example, your diesel vehicles, right? Now, Geotab's power takeoff or PTO technology assists in differentiating or distinguishing between true idling versus operational idling, all right? And then how can fleet managers now monitor idling in my Geotab? That's the main question. We can set up, for example, true idling and notification, the true idling rules and notifications, where also we can make use of driver coaching. So within the Geotab, there's a couple of driver coaching tools for idling. This is where the Geotab's driver feedback can be used. Now, driver feedback is audible alerts within the vehicle. The goal is that it can improve in the on-road behavior of drivers by notifying them of unsafe or potentially risky driving events, including things like idling, for example. All right. Another component to consider when it comes to some of the general tips that we can do is monitoring tire pressure. So proper tire inflation is a critical component, not only in maximizing fuel efficiency, but also tire life as well as safety. Underinflated tires, this can increase things like rolling resistance. And when this happens, resistance forces the engine, it forces the engine to use more fuel, as one can say. Underinflated tires have difficulty to get out of their own way, all right? A tire doesn't need to look a little flat to be underinflated. So please always make sure that you check it by using a tire gauge. In fact, a tire with 25% of the air let out still looks like it's fully inflated, all right? So rather be safe than sorry in this case. And then overinflated tire, ladies and gentlemen, on the other hand, give you a bumper ride. I think we've all experienced this at some stage, all right? And not only that, it compromises handling and it creates uneven tire tread or tread wear on your tires. Now, there's also a myth that the more your tire is inflated, the better fuel economy it will have. This isn't entirely true. Always keep your tires inflated at the recommended level as per manufacturer recommendations, okay? So when talking about preventive maintenance, fleet managers must put in place a formal, serious preventive maintenance schedule, including things like regular oil or fluid checks, wheel alignments, just to name a few, and the list can be endless. Now, it also assists in tracking your driver compliance via reporting, and it also assists in taking the swift action when drivers are negligent. So a vehicle's performance can be negatively impacted when not kept in top shape. The older and dirtier the oil gets, the harder the engine must work to circulate it or to keep up with the demand, thus resulting in more fuel consumption. And not forgetting the wear and tear on your engine, all right? So fleet managers in this case can make sure, or they can make use of Geotab's driver vehicle inspection report, or the DVIR, which is a formal record confirming that a driver has completed an inspection on a commercial motor vehicle or truck. Inspections are carried out at the beginning of the day or before work begins. And then also they will be then conducted at the end of the day when all the driving has been finished. So you can also refer to this as your pre or post inspection. Now, vehicle inspections are an important part of a driver's daily routine, and they are essential to keeping vehicles in good condition while ensuring road safety and optimal fuel economies for your fleets, or when it comes to your fleets. Now, once this has been put in place, it will be easy for fleet-based organizations to then decrease fleet fuel consumption in the long run when we're looking at the numbers, okay? So make certain that your filters are replaced also according to the manufacturer's requirements. Air and fuel flow can be negatively impacted when filters become clogged. And I think this is something that most of us, we know as drivers. And don't ignore the cooling system. Anything that makes the engine work harder wastes fuel or petrol and increases your fuel expenses, all right? So these are just some of the general tips that one can basically have a look at. Now, let's have a quick look at downsizing. When it comes to downsizing your vehicles. So when talking about downsizing, guys, fleet managers usually ask the question of, why can't we just use smaller cars? I mean, it sounds very simple. Now, that is usually the first thing that crosses management's mind when fuel costs begin to spike. However, it's not an all-rounder type of solution when you look at it from that perspective, but if done right, it can be a useful weapon in fighting rising petrol prices in your fuel. We can look for models that are more affordable or smaller, but can still do the job. That is the main thing. If they can still do the job and handle the driver's mission, maybe try to grab a demo from your manufacturer, have a driver use it for a couple of months and get feedback from him or her. The main thing again being if it can actually meet the demands of executing that job, Track your operating expenses carefully while this is being done, not just for fuel efficiency, things like tire life, maintenance and repair, and maybe total cost of ownership as well of the entire vehicle. And once now with that information, this is where we can now make well-informed decisions as fleet-based organizations, whether downsizing in a sense of smaller cars would then be a step in the right direction. All right. So when referring to downsizing, I'm also referring to carefully analyzing if the number of vehicles in your fleet are meeting the requirements, or are you possibly using more than required number of vehicles in your fleet, all right? So it will all take a careful analysis. Hence, earlier on, I did mention that this is an entire formal process that must be put in place and not just dumpsacking of what can be done or not done in order to resolve the issue of fuel prices. So when it comes to fuel reducing or fuel consumption in a fleet, it takes a holistic process or a holistic approach. So besides the reports that directly relate to fuel, Geotab software will help fleet managers to monitor other aspects that also contribute to fuel consumption. Driver behavior, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Now, driver behavior is one way of keeping unnecessary fuel consumption at minimum. Now, when you're talking about driver behavior, in a sense, like I said, it's aggressive driving. For example, things like excessive speeding, rapid acceleration, or harsh braking and cornering, just to name a few. Now, how can fleet-based organizations curb aggressive driver behavior? So this is where you can coach drivers and promote safer on-road behavior. The driver safety scorecard. The driver safety scorecard is a useful tool for this, identifying areas where drivers may need coaching and ultimately improving driving behavior and ensuring good asset management on the fleet vehicles. So the driver safety scorecard also provides data on who's the best performing driver versus the most poor performing drivers. Many of our clients currently are actually even introducing the whole aspect of the driver safety scorecard and taking it to an extent where they're now introducing rewards for top performing. And not only is this motivating to the drivers, but also encourages positive competition amongst the drivers. All right, now to assist in changing or improving driver behavior, fleet managers can also set up telematics rules and alerts for proper monitoring and to make use of the driver feedback, which I already touched on a little bit earlier on. All right, just to have a look at some of the reports that one can find on the Geotab software system. Geotab's fuel tracker add-ins are available on Marketplace, and this allows for you to measure an area of things, including things like the fuel economy, fuel cost per fill up, as well as your fuel spent. So now just to have a look at some of the reports that one can find from the So just a couple of reports that one can find on my Geotab software system in terms of fuel management. So Geotab's fuel tracker add-ins are available on Marketplace. And this allows for you to measure an area of things, including things like your fuel economy, fuel cost, cost per fill up, as well as things like the fuel spent in your entire fleet. All right. So Geotab offers a suite of comprehensive fleet management reports to manage fuel consumption, as well as to just have an idea on the fuel consumption within the fleet. So try the fuel usage and fill up report, for example, like we have over here. This report covers fuel consumed, the distance has been covered, as well as the fuel economy across a chosen or time period that your one has selected. This helps fleet managers identify the fuel efficiency and performance across the whole fleet or specific vehicles. Examine the fuel economy of your assets and determine the action needed to improve efficiency and slash the costs through improving the driver behavior or targeting maintenance. And then furthermore, the report helps to compare drivers of vehicles as shown in the graph on a weekly basis. So we see that fleet managers can observe that vehicle 3 in yellow has a more consistent consumption as compared to like vehicle 1 in blue, who had a huge spike in consumption in the second week of the month. So fleet managers can then use such data in the long run by monitoring and adapting the contributing factors of vehicle 3 to all the fleet. Here we have the fuel usage and fill-ups report. All right, so this is the second report. Every time the telematics device detects a fill-up or a fill-up event, it will appear in this report. This helps you to identify fuel-related fraud, for example, or contrasting these events with fuel usage and the transaction data. This report will assist fleet managers to have a bigger picture of the fuel economy of their vehicles, providing coaching opportunities to higher fuel economy vehicles or the vehicles that have a high fuel economy. And then comparing the fuel economy and the distance covered by the individual vehicles will then furthermore assist in answering the question of, are we doing things the right way or are we headed in the right direction? And then possibly highlight any incidents of theft if there are any within your fleet, which is a common problem in most fleet-based organizations. All right. And then the engine data profile, which is what you have here, is one of the data points provided by the engine data and defaults. This is a snapshot of fuel consumption during that day, for example, allowing a fleet manager not only data to manage fuel consumption, but also to have a bigger picture of the fleet overall productivity levels. All right. Now, beyond the reports included within my Geotab, the Geotab marketplace offers a variety of customized reports, including things like your weekly idle cost trend report, an average fuel economy report, or even things like your last 3 months fuel trend report, just to name a few. So have a look, visit the Geotab's marketplace. If you're struggling and you'd like assistance, always remember to be in touch with our support team, 011-564-5400. And this is where we can explain how the marketplace works on a more detail for you. All right. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we can see how important it is to have a proper fuel management process in place. While fuel is the biggest expense in running a fleet, the cost of fuel keeps rising and rising and rising. So understanding the bigger impact that small adjustments like the general terms that we touched on can have on a fleet, then we as fleet-based organizations are headed in the right direction. And Geotab, as mentioned, offers a suite of comprehensive fleet management reports and tools to help fleet managers manage driver behavior, manage fuel consumption, just to name a few. All right. To learn more about Geotab's fleet management solutions, like I said, get in touch with our dedicated team, also on info@geotabafrica.com. All right. So I think we can now handle a couple of questions that we might have. Right, so guys, that brings us to the end of today's session. Should you have any questions or would like to know more about any of our product offerings, visit our social media platforms or contact us. From my side, and on behalf of the Geotab Africa team, Thank you for joining, and see you again on our next session. So be on the lookout for that one. Okay, thank you guys, and stay safe.